The standard formula for building wealth usually goes something like this: earn as much capital as you can, lock it away, and let compound interest do the rest of the heavy lifting. But if you look inside one of the most widely read texts in human history, you'll find an economic blueprint that directly opposes that instinct. Instead of telling you to stockpile your assets, this formula insists that real financial growth relies on aggressive, continuous distribution. The central paradox is that wealth is achieved by acting like a channel, not a vault. To understand how this works, we have to start with a concept called risk. It translates roughly to provision, and it sets up a specific worldview: the idea that all wealth ultimately comes from a divine source, rather than purely through your own individual human effort. This is explicitly laid out in the Quran. Surah Al-Imran states, "God provides risk to whoever he wills, without account." If the absolute source of wealth is divine, it raises a practical question: what exactly should the individual do with their money right now? The answer is that since you aren't generating the source of the capital, your primary job is to manage its velocity. Your role shifts from being a storage container to an active, moving conduit. If you were to guess the subject of the absolute longest single verse in this book, you might assume it covers prayer, fasting, or some grand theological concept. It doesn't. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282, is dedicated entirely to the meticulous recording of debt and financial contracts. The text lays out rigid requirements. Every future obligation must be written down, witnesses are mandatory, and terms cannot be left to assumption. So the very first step to navigating this economic framework is extreme, rigorously documented accountability. You secure the capital through highly ethical, transparent commerce. Once that capital is secured and grown over a lifetime, the system introduces a hard, mechanical limit on what happens to it next. In Surah An-Nisa, the laws of inheritance are spelled out with absolute mathematical rigidity. Crucially, they forbid leaving an entire fortune to a single chosen heir. Instead, these legal mechanisms shatter that capital. They force it to be divided into specific fractional shares, a half here, an eighth there, spreading the wealth across a wide network of surviving relatives. This actively prevents dynastic wealth monopolies from forming. Rather than letting money stagnate in a single bloodline for generations, the legal code forces it back out into the broader community. We have the securing of capital and the subtraction of it at death. The final, most proactive step of the formula happens while you're still alive, the mandate of continuous charity. Surah Al-Baqarah asks what portion of wealth should be given. The answer: the excess. Siphoning this excess acts as a pressure valve, pushing stagnant capital to people who will immediately spend it. This redistribution is the mathematical engine driving the economy. This all ties back to a unifying concept known as amana. It is the understanding that wealth is a temporary trust to be managed, rather than a permanent object to be owned. Every rule we've looked at supports this. The strict contracts protect the trust, the inheritance laws divide the trust, and continuous charity circulates the trust. So if you want to understand how this text defines prosperity, you have to abandon the idea of building a dam to capture all the water. You have to build a mill upon the river. Individual wealth is achieved by becoming the most efficient, highly ethical conduit possible, keeping the water moving and keeping the community's economic engine alive.